This conference will now be recorded.
What? Okay. Sorry. All right. My bad. All right. In 1978, Israel signed peace with Egypt, and that marks the transformation of the Arab-Israeli conflict into the more local Arab-Palestinian conflict, because we also signed peace with Jordan, and we signed an agreement with the Palestinians that divides the West Bank into the map that you see at the top right corner. So area A in red is the area where it's under total Palestinian control. It's the main Palestinian cities. Area B is under Palestinian civil control, but Israeli security control. And this is area A and B are where 98% of Palestinians live. Area C, which is where the majority of the Israeli settlements are, is under Israeli civil control and security control, but is not considered part of Israel proper. It was supposed to be like a stepping stone on the way to a bigger agreement, and it kind of failed. All right. Here we go. Okay. Now, the big shift. Israeli politics is considered much more right-wing than European politics. And I noticed that for a lot of the Europeans that I'm speaking with, it's very difficult to understand why that is. So what is considered center in Israel, like myself, I'm voting for a center party. In Europe would be considered right-wing, moderate right-wing, let's say, or even a bit further. So the big shift occurred because Israel had this idea called land for peace, which basically says that we will give the Palestinians land and they will give us peace. Yitzhak Rabin, who was our prime minister in the 90s, he was really leading that line of thought. He was assassinated by an extreme right-wing Jew. That sent the country for a bit of turmoil for a while. But in the year 2000, Israelis made an offer to the Palestinians, a very, very generous peace offer. Yasser Arafat, who was the Palestinian leader, flat out rejected it. And the second intifada started. Intifada literally means rising up or shaking off. Okay. The first one happened in the 80s. It was mostly violent riots of Palestinians and Arabs living in Israel. The second one was much more violent. Waves of suicide bombers in shopping malls and buses. That's the picture of the burning bus that you have there. And it was actually quite terrifying. I was a kid growing up in Israel at the time, and it was really crazy. That's why Israel has such extensive security measures today. So when you land in Israel, if you ever took a flight to Israel or something, you will be searched a lot. And every shopping mall that you go into, every school that you go into, you have a security guard and things like that. That led to Israel launching a military operation in the West Bank and reconquering all the area that it gave to the Palestinians. And it made Israelis very, very efficient at fighting terrorist organizations. The second event is the disengagement from Gaza. So that happened around the year 2005. It was believed at the time by Israelis that if we will be the bigger person here and we'll give the Palestinians all of Gaza, until then it was occupied. We had soldiers there and civilians living there. But if we will completely withdraw and we will give it to the Palestinians, they'll see that we're not interested in and we will have peace and we can turn Gaza into the Singapore of the Middle East. That's what they said the plan is. The picture of the girl that you see crying there, she's being evicted of her home. It was a very traumatic event for Israel because as much as Israelis wanted peace, they also didn't want to see people forced out of their homes. And what happened was that when we withdrew, Hamas, which is the lovely bunch that you see at the bottom with the guns in the green, they did a military coup. They started a civil war in Gaza, and they overthrew Fatah. Fatah is the other Palestinian political parties. They have two main ones. They are both dictatorships, and they're not like democracies or anything like that. It was a very short, very brutal civil war. So you have Hamas members chopping the hands and legs of people who are supporters of Fatah in the street and letting them bleed, or throw their families off rooftops. It was very, very bad. And the result is that now Palestinians have two governments. There's one in the West Bank, Fatah, and one in Gaza, which is Hamas. And the last thing that happened was the second Lebanon war. The first one happened in the early 80s. There was a civil war in Lebanon, and Israel thought that back one of the sides there, we can gain an ally, but it turned into an absolute nightmare. The second war happened because Hezbollah, which is a terrorist organization that controls roughly 90% of Lebanon, the army, the political system, the economy, all of that, they run the show there. And they're backed by Iran. They kidnapped two of our soldiers. We went in to get them back, and that's how the war started. And these events really shifted Israeli politics to the right, which is why today only around 8% of Israelis identify themselves as left-wing. Israelis are, they have become more reluctant to offer deals, let's say, to our enemies. Now, through the eyes of the average Israeli, this is how they see the conflict. And this is based on most of my conversations with Israelis and most of the surveys that I read. I'm not saying that this is necessarily factually true. I'm just saying that this is how a lot of Israelis view the situation. So for the first time in 2,000 years, we finally have a state of our own. We are a tiny, tiny nation. We are surrounded by much larger enemies, and they all want to destroy us. Whenever we offer peace, we get war and suicide bombings and things like that. The world is against us, regardless of what we do. Then the media in the world is always reporting what bad things we're doing, even when we're doing good things. Like, I don't know if you know, but Israel, for example, built a hospital on the border with Syria to take care of wounded people in the Syrian civil war. It's not really being reported on, but if Israel kills 4 children by accident, that's all over the world. Same with governments around the world that constantly condemn Israel. So Israelis feel very isolated on that. And as time goes by, things really improve in Israel, which is factually true. The average Israeli today has a much better life than they had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and 30 years ago, respectively. The economy keeps growing. Israelis are much more secure, much more safe. They can afford a lot more. So a lot of Israelis are saying, why should we make the move to have peace when we are doing okay? All right. Briefly touching on geopolitics, because a lot of you asked it. It's very difficult to understand geopolitics. We as individuals, we are not used to thinking like states think. And we as Western people, we are not used to think like Middle Easterns think. Okay, so for example, you have Egypt in green. Okay, Egypt is approaching 100 million people. They don't have a way of feeding 100 million people. They have almost no infrastructure and they are bankrupt. Not only that, but Sudan and Ethiopia announced that they want to build a dam on the rivers that form the Nile to create electricity. That means that Egypt could very easily dry up and the country could collapse with 100 million refugees. You have Jordan. Jordan is a country that the British and the French made up. I'm not saying that there's no such thing as a Jordanian national identity, but majority of Jordanians are roughly 70% of them identify as Palestinians or Bedouins. The king ruling in Jordan are Hashemites, which is a small minority. They are not really loved by the people. Iran is a very scared country because they are Shia, which is 12% of the Muslim world. Throughout the centuries, dominated by the Sunnis, who are 80-something% of the Muslim world. And so what Iran did is that it noticed the vacuum that was created after America left Iraq. And so they took over Iraq, they took over Syria, and they took over Lebanon. And now they have a portal, they have a port to the Mediterranean Sea. And so they're trying to expand their borders and push their borders as far away as they can from their main population centers. This is also why they're trying to get a nuclear bomb, because they want to deter other Sunni countries like Turkey, for example, from attacking them. Turkey, really hungry country, they're just devouring whatever they can. They go to Syria, they go to Iraq, they send soldiers to Algeria now to fight there. They want to restore their status as the Ottoman Empire. Saudi Arabia, terrified country because Iran is closing in from all directions. They are helping the Houthi rebels in Yemen. They are helping the Shia majority in Iraq. They are fighting in Syria. So Saudi Arabia is really scared of that. And in the middle of all of that, you have Israel. And you can see why Israelis usually vote on matters of security and why they have this policy of Theodore Roosevelt, speak softly and carry a big stick. That's why also they respond very harshly to any threat from the outside, because they are really trying to deter everybody around us. Now, this is something that I recently came across, the Holocaust syndrome. It's not as conscious as one might think. However, recent surveys and studies have shown that Israelis actually don't fully understand how much the Holocaust impacts their decisions. And I'm not talking about decisions like where should we go eat lunch today, or what to study at university, but I'm talking about like the political decisions of when to go to war, how do we fight in a war, and things like that. So I brought 3 images for you guys on the right. At the bottom one, it says Am Yisrael Chai. It means the people of Israel are alive, or the nation of Israel is alive, with the Holocaust survivors and the soldiers. At the top, you have the women from the death camps and the Israeli women fighting in the army. And on the right, you have this the Holocaust kid, the kid from the ghetto, and the Israeli kid, and I'm counting on you, and things like that. These images are posted on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and whatever, nonstop, every Independence Day, every Holocaust Memorial Day, which are a week apart in Israel. And people become very emotional about this. And so to understand the numbers, in 1938, there were 18 million Jews worldwide, okay? And 2/3 of them were living in Europe. In 1945, 7 years after, there were only 12 million Jews worldwide. Now, according to the studies, and I can't elaborate how exactly they did the studies because it's very, very complicated, but if you want, I can send you the links and everything. If there was a state of Israel, and there wouldn't have been a Holocaust, by 2013, there would have been 35 million Jews worldwide. However, if there was a Holocaust and the state of Israel was not established, we would have only been 6 million Jews worldwide today. And if you want to understand this subconscious fear, motivator, driving force that Israelis face when they are making these type of decisions, political decisions, just take the difference between 6 million and 35 million. All right, briefly touching on the Palestinians, because I really want to get questions from you. It's just that a lot of you really specifically asked that I'll talk about it. The Palestinians are in a very, very tough situation. First of all, they have 2 governments, Fatah versus Hamas. They both hate Israel more than they hate, they both hate each other more than they hate Israel, sorry. There is insane, ridiculous incitement in their schools, in their mosques, on their social media, and their television. I brought a few examples on the pictures here on the side, but it's ridiculous. They make Nazi Germany look like schoolboys. Both governments are incredibly corrupt, ridiculously corrupt. Just so you understand, Fatah, which are the more moderate ones, so to speak, spend more than half of their annual budget on paying people who murdered Jews and are sitting in Israeli prisons. And the salary that they get is based on how many Jews they killed. Just so you understand how corrupt this is. Their economy is obviously totally failing, totally collapsing. They cannot sustain themselves. And unfortunately, I don't see a chance of a viable Palestinian state in the coming years, maybe in a few decades, because these things take a long time. But they need to do a big cultural shift, a big shift in mentality, because at the moment it's a downward spiral for them. Right. So after all of this bombardment of information that I gave you, what can we do? First of all, I think it's very important to understand the point of view of the side that you're talking about or speaking with, even if they are factually wrong. Because if you understand how Israelis view the situation, it's a lot easier for you to speak with Israelis or speak with people about Israelis. This is something that most people agree by now. Peace must come from ground up. So in the agreements, in the previous agreements that we signed with the Palestinians, we basically recognize the government that they have that is a dictatorship and does not represent them, and we forced upon them this organization that doesn't really represent their needs and their desires. And we did it also because it was very comfortable for us, because finally we have someone to negotiate with. But really, the best thing to do is to build bridges on the level of the individuals, and from there it can grow. Because the problem is that Palestinians meet Israelis when Israelis are in the army, and Israelis meet Palestinians when Israelis are in the army. And this is the experience that we have with each other. And also educate yourselves as much as possible. Don't take my word, for everything I said right now. Go do your own research, read yourself, read multiple sources of information. I put a list here. You can take it and write it. But really also you can just go on YouTube, write Israel, watch a few videos who say something, watch a few videos who describe a different situation, figure out for yourself what's true and what's not. There's a lot of propaganda out there, but you guys are smart. I'm sure you figure it out. And all right, I would really love for you guys to ask some questions now. So I will unmute all of you if I figure it out how to do it. Okay, here we go. I think it worked. No,
okay.
It's not
Tom?
working. Okay. Wait, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question about the education system in Israel.
Yeah, sorry, just who is speaking? Can you just introduce yourself real quick?
It's Victor.
Victor, okay, perfect.
Okay, just can you tell us a little bit more about the education system in Israel? And second question, how was the treatment of this war with Palestine and with the Arabic world? How was the treatment of the conflicts when you were in school?
Okay, when you want me to, just the first question, you want me to elaborate on the Israeli education system or the Palestinian education system? I missed that.
The Israel one. And the question is for both of you, Tom and Eden.
Eden, yeah, no problem. Want to start?
Hi, Victor. Thank you. Great question. I'm just moving around so I can see you guys clearly. First of all, I must say that I studied in educational college in order to work in the education system. So I actually have a really wide understanding and familiarity with the education system. Few interesting facts about the Israeli education system. First of all, it's a 12-year, like every elementary, middle school, and high school program. In Israel, we have a law of education, meaning that it's in law that every 3-year-old citizen in Israel must be in educational system. It's funded mainly by the government. Obviously, there are private sectors as well. The non-Jewish facilities of education have their own autonomy-based and regulations of their curriculum and what they teach, meaning that schools, Arab schools, have the ability to choose their curriculum for their students. They all apply together to a bar test, I guess, at the end, or a bagrut, like CTIs and stuff like that. And that's in the matter of different perspective. Interesting fact to also know about the educational system in Israel, that we have three sectors. The, let's say, public one, private ones, and then we have minority ones. In minorities, like I mentioned, we have the Arab educational system where they have autonomy, but we also have the ultra-Orthodox system. And that's really interesting because the ultra-Orthodox system, educational system, is a main key of what leads to one of the biggest gaps in the Israeli society today, which means that the ultra-Orthodox community is not really integrating into the Israel social workforce. They don't have in the school structure math studies, English studies, science studies. So when those ultra-Orthodox young people start their life, because all of their intensive studies are really based on Judaism and learning the Bible, learning the Torah, and very, very religious form, their starting point in life is a very, very, very different than the common Israeli. And we see the gaps of our generation of how they are not a majority of a force when it comes to economical balance in the Israeli part. Now, regarding your questions about how the Israeli system teach about the conflict, right? That was your question. So that's a good question, because throughout the I don't know, since Israel was established, the way we teach history is evolving every time, and not only by time, but evolves also by a governments in power. If we have a very right-wing government in power, it will sink into the textbook they teach in school. So the narrative that we learn in Israelis are really, really empowered by whoever is kind of building the syllabus for youth. We do learn about the Nakba, which means the independence war from both sides. We learn through an Israeli narrative, and I can tell you that I'm happy with it, that in the past decade, more and more schools are implementing, alongside to the Jewish Zionist narrative of the story of how we establish, a Palestinian narrative as well. I can't say that it's on schools, it's not happening everywhere, but we can see how more and more younger teachers, younger educators, younger students are asking, saying, wait a minute, if this is what we're being taught from our perspective, what is going on from others' perspective? And this is something that I can definitely say that we have a lot to work on, but we are on a good direction of understanding that there are more points of view to teach our young generation. And the young generation in Israel, from first hand I can tell you, is a very, very political youth. They know a lot about the conflict. They are expected to have an opinion. A lot of them are volunteering political movements. A lot of them are in youth movements that do a lot of activism in the state of Israel. So I really hope that it will lead us to a better future. We have a lot of criticism about it, educational system, but in overall, I hope I kind of covered what you were asking.
Thank you very much, Eden.
Yeah, it was a very good answer, Eden. Very good answer. I will add just a little thing because Eden really answered what I would have answered. Israel is like it's a free society, and you have many different groups with many different political opinions. The Palestinians are not. Okay, I'll give you an example, okay, of a few laws that you can find, or instance things that happened there. It is according to Palestinian law, if you sell your land to a Jew, it's punishable by death. Okay. They are being taught very specific things from history. In Israel, I would say that there are certain people in power that want to teach a certain narrative to their kids or to the kids of the country. There are also others, and they different schools bring also different speakers. I personally learned both sides of the conflict of the narrative. Most people also, and in Israel generally, I would say there is a better understanding, not a full understanding, but a better understanding of the other side of the conflict. We talk about it a lot more. From my conversations with Palestinians, which were not a lot, I regret to say, but from the Palestinians I spoke with, there is almost zero understanding of the Israeli side, to the point that they don't even understand what are we doing here. They don't understand that there is a majority of Israeli Jews that are originally from Middle Eastern countries. They did not know that. So the Israeli education system is not perfect, but they're doing an all right job at teaching history on a factual level, so to say. I hope that clears things up a bit.
Okay, thank you. Perfect.
Well, I have a question. Just what you were talking about, like the young Israelis are gonna teach like the Palestinian point of view and the Israeli point of view. Not everyone, but most of them. They're very politically involved. And before that, you talk about the fact that the third generation of Israelis are like different than the beginners or the one who are still coming. So what's the shift that you're talking about in the mentality? Like, are the people more ready to, I don't know, maybe find a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian issue, or what's this political shift? Is it getting radicalized, or on the other way, more, I don't know, maybe trying to find a
Is it for me
solution
or
which
for
is
Eden,
more
the question?
peaceful? Now, I'd love to know about now, like the youth, the Israeli youth. What's the shift that you're talking about? Because I think you heard
Just
you talked about that.
Alban, I'm just asking, if are you asking me or Eden or both of us?
Oh, both of you. I don't. I
Okay.
mean, I guess you have different minds. But...
Okay, I'll start and Eden will give a follow-up. So, yeah, Israeli youth, they are very active politically. It's actually quite admiring to see that. They really care about where the country is going. And also, they, among their peers, the people their age, they are expected to have a political opinion and know about history and politics and things like that. I think that what you are seeing is a larger and larger involvement of the youth. However, majority of Israelis that are in positions that they can vote right now, so 18 and older, grew up during the times of the Second Intifada and the disengagement from Gaza and these events that I was talking about. And it's again, it's not that it totally radicalized all Israelis, but it made a lot of Israelis believe that maybe peace is not possible, and if it is possible, now is not the time. But I can tell you from my own experience that as Ed said, the past 10 years, even a bit more, Israelis are a lot more open to a narrative that is not something that represents themselves, but from the other side. And Eden can do a little follow-up.
Thanks. Great question, Alban, and I think we could actually divide it into two parts. First of all, if you a little bit heard about what's going on in the Israeli politics today, this is the shift we're seeing. We're seeing a shift of a generation that is changing. This is why for the past year and a half, Israel hasn't been able to form a government. Okay, this is a generation changing. This is an opinion shifting. But, and this is a big but, the thing is that as long as Israel's security fences, okay, the politics of fences. Tom talked about how 70% of what people care about in Israel is security. He's right. But from, let's say, the 90s, late 90s, start of 2000, after Intifada, security was quite stable. Okay, it was quite stable. This is something that people said we have control over it, and people, the middle class or the people who are working very, very hard, starting to feel as though for 60 years, this country was only based on politics of security. What about cost of living? What about being able to buy an apartment? What about how to pay, rent, food, and so on? And the urge of the things that we should fix have started to be more and more in domestic politics and less of what's happening in the borders. And it's a great question to ask. Is the new generation is more, politically involved in how to fix a conflict, or state like general shift of change in a bigger view of politics? I think the answer is the second one. It's a bigger view of change in how politics should occur. One of them is a part of the conflict. So we can see I think after Tom said the shifty to the right, it's been almost 30 years now that we have in power a right government. Tom, am I right? Like 30, roughly 25 years, right government in power. And in the year and a half that they're trying to create a government after elections, we're seeing a battle of giants between central, it's not left, it's central, and right, because the generation is changing. It's a youth that says, wait a minute, I'm not agreeing with the old people anymore. I have a different opinion. This is where the clash comes in. So if you wanted to see something visual of a change, this is the change that I think we see today in our world.
Yeah,
Thank you
and
very much.
I will also say that someone asked me before, I forgot who it was, but they asked me to explain how my political views shifted from left to right to center after my military service. And so I grew up in Tel Aviv at a very secular home. Grew up, most of Tel Aviv is quite liberal and left-leaning. In high school, I experienced these events that we discussed, and I became very radical, very right-wing. And when I got to the army, and I served as a medic. It's called a combat medic, but it's a medic in a unit that's stationed on the border with Gaza. And I noticed that a lot of the right-wing politicians, they for me it was like this: the left-wing politicians couldn't really identify the problem. They sold to the Israeli public this ideology that we are all human beings, and if we all just smoke some weed and sing Kumbaya next to the fire, we'll get along just fine. And really, it blew up in our faces, literally. And so a lot of us became very right-wing. I remember me and my friends in high school, we were very extreme. Like Marine Le Pen had a lot to learn from us. Okay. However, when I got to my military service, I realized that a lot of the things I'm seeing on the ground are not as clear cut, and it's more complicated than that. And that, yes, our right-wing politicians are identifying the problem correctly, but they are not really doing anything about it at all. And so we're just prolonging this situation with Gaza, we're prolonging the situation in the West Bank, and we're not really advancing, and we should be advancing more. And I feel like a lot of Israelis felt that. They felt that they are not left-wing, but they are not right-wing, and the main blocks of power in Israel until very recently were one huge central party and one huge right-wing party. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, Tom, I have a question for you and Eden about the fact that why Israel is a Jewish state, because there is a problem for the Arab minority in Israel. We don't feel represented at all, because Israel, from the Jewish point of view, should be the Jewish nation state. So what do you think about it? And do you think that it's one of the key elements in why the conflict, remains?
It's a very good question, Pauline. Very, very good question. One might suspect that you spent some time in Israel.
Yeah.
I will answer, and I will let Eden do a long follow-up, because me and Eden talked about this a lot. So me and Eden, we both voted for the same political party, but we are on the extremes of those parties. Eden is more left, and I'm more right. The way most Israelis see it, and I would say that so do I recognize the problems of the Arab minorities in Israel. You know, we have the flag as the Star of David, which is Jewish. Our anthem is talking about the Jewish soul and how it yearns to return to Zion and be a free people in our own land and all of that, which is better than the French anthem, in my opinion. Sorry, but it's the French anthem. I understand where they're coming from. However, we are the majority here, and we will set the tone. And we will give them all the equal rights that they want. All they have to do, I'm not talking about the Palestinians, I'm talking about the Israeli Arabs, the Arabs living inside the borders of Israel that have an Israeli citizenship. Palestinians are a different story. But as I said, we are the majority. We came to establish a state here. We will give them all their civil rights. They can vote, they can be elected, they can walk in the street and do whatever they want, and they don't have to fear for their lives. But they have to understand that this is Israel and this is the Jewish state. Like I would also argue that an Algerian immigrant in France has to understand that he came to France. He did not came to second Algeria. So this is my opinion about it. And now we'll let Eden speak, and you'll see what a radical different answer you'll get.
I think you can see me moving in my chair while Tom was talking, like uncomfortably. Just kidding. It's a very soft topic, not only because of minorities in Israel as Israel being a Jewish religious state, but also for Israelis that Israel is a Jewish state. Now, I would say something different from a different perspective. I understand that people were here before we arrived. We know that. Okay, we could talk about, going thousands of years back and saying, oh, but we were here first in the Bible. No one cares. Okay, we know that there were people here before the Zionists came and established that what we know today as an Israel, a Jewish state, and so on. I think the reason that Israel is a Jewish recognized religious state is because we have nowhere else to go. We really don't. Now, it has clashes all the time in how we get married, in our way of where we can go on days of the week. On Saturdays, things are closed. I'll tell you what, it's more likely that people who are non-Jewish in Israel have more democracy rights and a way to fulfill their rights than Jewish in Israel. And we'll talk about it in a second. But I will say this. I'll say that when it comes to rights and whatever legal rights minorities have in Israel when they're not Jewish, they are fully set. They have representation in the court, in the government, in all professions, from security to medicine and so on. We would see presence of a Arab minority in Israel where they have fully rights. That being said, it doesn't mean we don't see racism. And racism there's in every country, so I'm not holding us accountable on this one, because racism is a different problem. But when it comes to rights, people here are having equal rights by law, and if things are going wrong, some Jewish Israeli will be sentenced on it for whatever law they're breaking and so on. I will say that when I ask myself the question of like, what happens if it wouldn't be a Jewish state, or what happened if it wouldn't have Jewish laws in it? And this is where the democracy comes in and could be very scary. What happens if Israel is a democracy and the government in power is not Jewish. Could happen. Okay, take 50, 40, 60 years from now. Okay, the government in power, it's a democracy, people can get elected and so on. And the government, the biggest party is actually Palestinian, and they're saying, you know what? F this shit, you know, we don't want this game anymore of a Jewish state. We are cleaning everyone up. Let's bring Hamas in, let's take control and so on. And then the purpose of having a Jewish home for the Jewish people who has been chased and prosecuted for so many years is gone, you know, into the air. It's not a reason to, God forbid, put people in second-class citizenship, and this is by far not what we're doing when it comes to citizenships. Like I said, Palestinians, and Tom said it right, Palestinians a different story, and it's a complex one. But when it comes to having a Jewish state, it's the understanding that my kids and my kids' kids and their kids would have a place to be in no matter what, no matter where they're born, and if they're, you know, have a home to be a part of. And this is something that I think a lot of our age, our generation is sometimes missing, a place to feel a part of, knowing that people are going through the same things as you are, having a really, really, really deeper understanding of the root that you are part of something bigger and you're not alone is something important. I really hope that I gave my perspective from that end and somehow kind of balanced Tom's answer. If you have any more questions, I would love to answer. It was a really good one. Thanks for that.
Yeah, it was a good question, I'll admit. Anybody else? Feel free, really ask whatever you want. We are here to answer.
Yes, I have a question for both of you. Beyond a religious perspective, do you think that Western countries are responsible for such a conflict by the time they decided to create and to establish the State of Israel?
Eden will answer that because I'm taking a selfie for a friend so he can see what we're doing.
Thank you. Timothy, that's your name?
Yep.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Are they responsible? Look, it's really hard to point fingers looking back, right? It's too hard to say you're in fault. Western society invading other places in the planet caused so many problems that are only now realized. I would say, just to your question, that there are a lot of other countries that needs to be accountable for this conflict, and they're actually closer to us than you think. I think Jordan, for example, have a major part in this conflict, not only for the conflicts, but the well-being of refugees. They have, Tom showed the numbers, but a huge amount of Palestinian refugees that they are not considered to be Jordanians. They fled there for help, seeking for help. The same with Egypt, not opening their borders for Gazans. So we see other countries that needs to ask themselves and have, you know, self-consciousness of saying, wait a minute, how are we helping or, you know, making the game worse for Palestinians? Regarding Europe countries or Western countries, in the way looking back at the establishment of things and what could be done, I know that the British, according to what I learned and read in the last, you know, historical documentaries and researchers and stuff like that, the Brits had a lot to do in this game, promising the land with after the end of the mandate, the British mandate in the Israeli territories, to the Jews, and at the same time offering it to the Mufti of the Arab communities that were here. So the same promise was offered to both tribes of people. So definitely they had a hand. If they are the ones who are responsible to fix it now, maybe that's the question we should ask, you know, like should be involved in a conflict that they're not part of, but actually started it? Good question. That's per my end. So Tom, if you want to take it away.
Good question. I'll add a few things to what Eden said before. You have to understand what happened in our war of independence, or as the Palestinians call it, the Nakba, which means catastrophe, is that around 700,000 Palestinians either fled or were forced to leave their homes. Okay, this is all documented by the Israeli army, and we acknowledged it already that it actually happened. At the same time, roughly speaking, around 850,000 Jewish refugees had to flee Arab countries because of riots against Jews and violent attacks and even government policies. The main difference is that the Jews who fled to Israel were fully integrated into society. Okay? The Palestinians who fled to Lebanon, to Syria, to Egypt, to Saudi Arabia, wherever, were not. So in Lebanon today, for example, there are certain jobs that Palestinians are not allowed to have, or they are not allowed to go to university. Okay? Nowadays, Lebanon is on the brink of economic collapse, and they could have a civil war there. So it's not their biggest issues at the moment, but this has been going on for the past 70 years. Now, just to make sure I understood, you said, should we hold Western powers accountable for the situation here? Was that what you were talking about?
Yeah, your point of view.
Okay. Well, okay, let's say that we decide to hold the British and French accountable for what happened in the Middle East, okay? First of all, I would say that the British and French are not evil by nature, okay? They did it. It was a mistake. They divided these lands into areas that shouldn't have been divided into. That's why you have a civil war in Syria. That's why Iraq was falling apart. That's why Yemen is falling apart. If you look at, let's take Yemen, for example, okay? If you take Yemen and you look at a topographical map, so you see where the mountains are, where the rivers are and all that, every mountaintop has a different clan, a different tribe of people, okay? And these tribes don't, it's not that they are not on best terms. They don't intermarry. They only keep it in the family, so to speak, or sometimes really in the family, okay? Let's say you could, in Iraq, of course, Iraq has, I think, 4 different religions, 6 different ethnicities, and dozens of different tribes. Syria as well, and so it won't work. It's very easy for us to look back at it and say, well, how do they think it's going to work? Because they are European, they were dominating the world, and it worked everywhere else. So, I mean, it worked in Europe for them. You know, in France, you have Burgundy, you have Brittany, you have Normandy, you have Aquitaine, but you all managed together to become French. Why wouldn't it work in Iraq? And that's what they were trying to do. It is a very European way of looking at things, but they are European. You know, it's very easy to criticize them retrospectively, so to speak. Now, if we are going to take this approach of Western powers should be criticized for the havoc they created and all of that, how far back do you want to go? Because should the Turks be held accountable for the havoc they created in the Balkans? Should Arabs be held accountable for the havoc they created in Spain? You know, you can keep going back and back and back and back, and it will not end. So yes, I admit that it's problematic, but how much do let's take Europe in particular? How much should France be held accountable for what they did? And until, like, how far do you want to go back in time? I think this game of blame, it's not going to bring anything. And which brings me to my last point. Sorry for the long answer. This game of blame is very easy to play. Okay? You are French. You occupied Algeria, and now I'm a Muslim. Now I'm angry with you. All right. And other people do it. You know, South Americans can say it to the Spanish or Portuguese or whatever. Palestinians do it to the Israelis. I have friends from school that studied with me, some of them were Israeli Arabs and some of them were Palestinian Arabs. They were living in East Jerusalem. It's the eastern neighborhoods of Jerusalem. And they studied at my university. And they told me that they have a joke. When they go out and they can't find parking, they say, oh, it's Israel's fault. Why? Because everything is Israel's fault. Why don't we have a good economy? Ah, it's Israel's fault. Why aren't we a democracy? It's Israel's fault. Why is our education system so terrible? It's Israel's fault. And so I think you should be very careful with this pointing fingers and game of blame, you know? It's my opinion. It's better to take responsibility for your own life than to say how other people screwed you over.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else? Any more questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Rafa here speaking. Thank you for your time, Tom and Eden. So
No
you talked shortly about the settlements. I'm not very well informed, but as far as I can see, there are still settlements being constructed in Palestinian territory. So I'd like to know what's your point of view as Israelis, yours, Tom, and also maybe Eden's, of these settlements. What do you think, as Israelis, what do you think should be done about this?
Yeah.
So that's it.
You're about to see a heated debate again. Okay, no. First of all, I am not a big supporter of the Israeli settlement policy. Okay, the reason why it started in the first place is because, first of all, there were Israelis that just moved there, and at times the government of Israel, especially the left-wing governments, by the way, took this as an opportunity to carve up Palestinian territory. I will send you the presentation if you want, or you can even just Google a map of the West Bank, and you will see how Israeli settlements are placed all around in different areas, and Palestinians are not able to have I forgot the word for it, sorry, a geographical connection, a territorial connection between their land. Now, having said that, there are some places that are they're not the classic settlement anymore. Okay, so when Israelis say settlement, we usually mean the far outposts, caravan on a hilltop with a tent or something, crazy religious people that think that all this land is ours and we should kick all the Palestinians out. Some of them, of the extreme ones, by the way, they are also opposing the existence of the state of Israel. They think the state should not be a democracy, but should only be religious. This is what we say when we mean the crazy settlers. When European governments or other governments in the world say settlements, they basically mean every place where Israelis live that was after 1967 borders. So, for example, the European Union decided to label products from the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights were taken from Syria. Syria is no longer a functioning country. Even if we wanted to give it back, who would we give it back to? There's no one to talk to on the other side. And there are no Palestinians living there. But the European Union decides that every village or town in the Golan Heights is a settlement. There are certain places in the West Bank. These are the main settlement blocks. That's what we call them in Hebrew. They are large cities already, or very large towns. And no Israeli, except from the very radical ones, the very left-leaning radical ones, thinks about giving these places back, because you have several hundreds of thousands of people living there. It doesn't make sense to take, 400,000 people and tell them, okay, move. So a lot of Israelis support land swaps, that we will take these lands, but we will give the Palestinians other lands. If you look at Trump's peace plan and earlier peace plans from before, they talk about land swaps. Also, and I don't support that, but I understand why the Israeli governments are doing it. We have a very hard time bringing the Palestinians to the negotiating table. because they think the more they will wait, the more the international community will be upset with Israel and will boycott us or force us to give them a country or whatever. And so what we do a lot of times, and I don't support it, but I understand why some governments use this trick, is that we build settlements and we take more land. And that will pressure the Palestinians to come to the negotiating table. I don't agree with it. I think it's a dirty trick, but this is politics. You play dirty, you know? I don't like it. That's why I'm not a politician.
Okay, thank you.
Rafael, you touch my soft spot. This is all my left side coming at you right now. Ready for it?
Ready.
I should be ready for it.
You should be ready for it, Tom. I think I should start a little bit about my background just to make you understand how complex this story is for me. I grew up in a kibbutz, which is a very, very small community that is raised on commune values, meaning education system together, economy is together, and so on. That's a different topic. If you have questions on that, I would be happy to talk about. But since I grew up, my family moved to a small community in the Wadi Ara area, which is a valley in the northern side of Israel. And my community was placed in an area that is highly, highly populated with Israeli Arabs villages. Okay, so I was really literally growing up in the most multicultural coexistence you can imagine. Okay, I did my shopping in the Arab village nearby. My parents had, best friends that are not Jewish Israeli, they were Arabs, and so on and so on. So I know what it means living together. And actually my community would be, in some perspective, almost a settlement, because we're really close to what we call today the Green Line. The Green Line is what, I don't know if Tom showed you, like the main area of what the Palestinian territory is and the Gaza part. So the Green Line is like what defines between what Israel is and what the West Bank is. So the Green Line is like something you can't really see it. There's a border, but people are always asking, are you a part of the Green Line? Are you outside of it? And so on. I think Israel should stop right away with building more settlements. And talking from the point of view of almost living in a settlement, right? I think that it's useless. I think that it's something that make our brothers and sisters who are in the army die for something that I don't feel that is right for now, to create more establishment, to grow and grow. We have enough. We are strong. We are secure. This is just poking in Palestinians that already are in a mess. If you would ask me, I would make sure that settlements are from a specific number of population. Obviously, I'm not going to take out thousands of people, like 200,000 or 300,000 people outside of their home just because of an ideology like that, if they're not really risking a peace plan. But if there's an opportunity to do something big and building must stop, then it must stop. If settlements that are small and they're just there for ideological reasons, they must be out of there. Like I truly and I know my husband, my partner who sits here, is annoyed with what I'm saying right now, and Tom is annoyed with what I'm saying now. But yes, but I think that we are strong, we are good. I don't think that they are behaving as a barrier and protecting the center of Israel. No, I don't like this claim. I don't think it's right. And I think it's in some ways even what's increasing the conflict. This is my point of view of settlements. Sorry
So
if
just,
I touched soft
just to finish,
for anyone else.
So would you consider fair, for example, returning those territories like the UK did with Hong Kong a couple of years ago, give them back to Palestine? Would you consider that a fair solution? Or
so generally I would say yes. Okay, land for peace. Tom talked about it before, that approach of saying, okay, no problem, let's take people out. The problem with that is that we've done it in 2005 and in multiple occasions when we withdraw Jewish communities outside of Palestinian territories in return for peace, and we got rockets and terrorists. So common people would tell me, oh, so why would you still want to do it? My claim against that claim would be that when we withdraw at 2005, I don't think it was a really mutual agreement. I think Israel just woke up one morning, said, "Tov sababa, let's leave. Let's pack our bags and leave. Everything will be fine. Everything will be fine. Now they're going to be happy." There wasn't an agreement. There wasn't a policy. There wasn't a structure. There wasn't something that was, integrated into a cultural way that is grounded. And what happened is that both sides are traumatized. Israelis are mad at their government for making them leave. Palestinians are saying, doesn't mean you won, or doesn't mean you need to be the good guy one. I'll still do whatever I want. Okay. And then we just have more and more problems. So generally, I think there should be a withdrawal in places that are not necessary for Israel, and if they're not promoting anything by if it's not a peace agreement and co-living, they should be out. If they're out, it needs to be integrated process in a cultural way that lasts for generation. If it makes sense, what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is actually it's a classic example of Israelis that are technically from two different political perspectives, even though we vote for the same party in the end, and agreeing on most things. Like I agree. If you could promise me, Rafa, that I'm giving the keys to the Palestinians tomorrow, I'm leaving there, and I'm never speaking to them again. I'm not trying to hurt them or nothing, and I'll have peace, I'll do it. Will it happen? I seriously doubt it, because we tried it before and it didn't work. Also, there are certain places that I mentioned before, they are large population centers. It wouldn't make sense for me to give it back, but I would offer them land in return. Google after Trump's peace plan or Olmert's peace plan. Olmert was the prime minister we had in 2008. And you will see on the map, they are offering land in exchange to the land that we will take from them. Yeah, but this is one of the topics that is like the most heated discussions around Israeli dinner tables, So question. All right, next.
I have just a little question over what we just talked about. Is that how does it justify anything to say that? Sorry, I'm just trying to challenge the idea, but
challenge as much as you want.
If giving back the lands to the Palestinians won't bring peace, it's just that Israel was given a land. This is I don't know, war declaration to have settlements, because it's like bringing the land always further in the already like small Palestinian communities. And I actually believe that the Palestinians are in huge trouble in these times. They're quite violent and they're in war with Israel. But I don't know why, why does this justify that if you bring back settlements, it won't bring peace, of course, but settlements are an act of war itself. I mean, from my Western point of view, or I just feel like settlements are already like not justified for the Palestinians. So if you bring them back, they say, okay, you give us what you owe us, but this is not enough, because they want like the whole Israel land to be, I don't know, to be bombed or just changed. But the thing is that settlement is, what I'm trying to say is that giving them back won't bring peace. It's not a justification for more settlement or for this settlement politics. I do think so, but I do believe that you have different opinions as you live there.
Yeah.
And it's also
you don't know how much, Albert. You don't know how much different opinion than we live here. They said there's a saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinion. You know that saying? So there you go.
Yeah, I'll just do a few short replies, and I'll let Eden reply, because I'm actually interested in her opinion about it. So, okay, first of all, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. At the moment, the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority, which is the body that represents Palestinians internationally, and the Palestinian government in the West Bank, we are not at war. There are individual Palestinians that commit terror attacks. The Palestinian government, we have a lot of issues with them, but we collaborate on security issues. The main reason is because we are both more afraid of Hamas than of each other. And Hamas is very popular in the Palestinian street because they are considered more radical. And we don't want Hamas to rise, and they don't want to die, their government. So we are not in a constant war or something like that. I completely understand what you're saying regarding the settlements, that it is an act of, we are aggravating them. We are making them more angry by building more. I can totally see that, which is why personally I'm not in favor of building more settlements. I am in favor of keeping the main settlement blocks building there because people live there and they need a school or whatever, you know, a kindergarten, I don't know. But I am against expanding isolated settlements and making them bigger. I think we should focus on what we need. And I think the main problem is that Israelis have not decided what they want. They didn't decide which territories are important for our security, which are not important for our security, and what do we want to do with it. A lot of Israelis will respond to what you said by saying, listen, we need more places to live. A third of the people living in the settlements right now in territories that are over the green line move there because it's cheap, not because of ideology or anything like that. So
which is another way of the government to promote settlements.
True,
Like,
true,
come on,
true.
you know that.
True. But I can understand the average person saying, listen, do I want a one-bedroom apartment in Haifa or Tel Aviv, or do I want a house in a beautiful area? So on the individual level, I can understand them. When I was a kid, my doctor, my general practitioner, she lived in a settlement, but she's not radical. She's not even religious. As I said, I don't want you guys to understand that Tom supports settlements or something like that. The current settlement policy that we have, I think it's stupid.
I can understand Eden opposes settlements. That's fine with me.
Yeah, Eden opposes settlements. Totally. Yeah. A lot of Israelis will tell you, listen, there are certain lands that we need and we will take them. We have to set facts on the ground because there's no one to talk to on the other side. I think it's not, how to say it gently, it's a bit of a looking the other way approach. You know, they are ignoring the problem. The problem will keep being there and will keep growing unless we change something. What do we change? How do we change? It's very problematic. And I want Eden to continue, please.
Well, I'm just gonna agree with you, man. Not Tom.
Cool, man.
Alban,
it's cool.
That's your name. Right.
It is.
So yeah, I agree. I think the continuance of building settlements when there aren't, you know, solid peace agreements or a plan, it's just poking in the eye not only to Palestinians but to the European Union and the UN and the national, you know, whatever. It's just being aggressively determining the way we act and reflecting values that I personally don't agree with. It's something that is being hard for me for years. Debating with my own political identity, shifting between left to right to central in so many different topics. Okay, I love my state. I love my country. I love my people. I see myself as a proud Zionist. I don't see myself as representing every government, Israeli government in power and their decisions. And this is something very, very important for me to say. I don't think Zionism, the purpose of Zionism is to take all the land of Israel that was meant to be here. Not at all. I think it's believing that should be a Jewish state on the land of Israel in any form and shape. That could be debatable, but it needs to be here. And I really think that the whole conflict is not about land. Alban, and maybe it's an opportunity for me to say something deeper about the conflict and what's my perspective about what the conflict really is. It's about two ways of approach of two different people as groups, right? Not people, individuals, but two groups of people who are looking at future and past differently. And I'm going to explain what I mean. I went to college up north part of Israel, and in my college, like in Israel, we had 20% of Israeli Arab students. Okay, a lot of them refer themselves as Palestinians. Some refer themselves as Israelis. It was their choice of identification or whatever they want. And I had a lot of good friends, and we got to really, really deep conversations about the future and past of Israel and its conflicts and its people in it. And I remember sitting with one of my best friends that day. His name was Mustafa. And from his name, I'm assuming that you understand that he was an Israeli Arab from the north, a Muslim, Bedouin actually. And we started to have a conversation. I asked him, Mustafa, I have a question. If tomorrow there is a Palestinian state is born, no matter where, but like here in the area, a bit far, would you move? Would you move to a Palestinian state? And he said no. And I said, really, why? He's like, because my grandfather's planted the tree here. And this is my home. I don't need to move. You need to move. And my question back to him was like, wouldn't you want the future of your children's children to have an identity and freedom and place to be a people of their own? And then I reflect to myself, and I'm asking my grandparents or Tom's grandparents fled Germany and Europe because they couldn't live there anymore, because they were persecuted, they didn't have rights, they were, doomed to die, and their grandfathers planted trees there also. And they left because of the idea of having a state with rights, with ideology, of being a home for your people was stronger than a tree, if it makes sense in a way. So this is the clash. I'm not saying all Palestinians are like that. I'm not saying all Israeli Arabs, but it was just an example to give you a clash by saying, this is my land and I'm not moving, by saying, I will do anything it needs to have a state for the idea of a state. And this is why I think that the conflict is like, like it's we're talking different values here. We're not talking the same language of where we come from when it comes to values of how we believe our future should be, and this is the main gap as I see it. So that's why I think that the idea of land is stupid. Sorry, like it's not relevant of where we stand today. We should look kadima, we should look forward and say, okay, how should the future of our children look like? And that should determine our decisions for both Palestinians and for Israelis. Drop the mic, and then that's it. That was my speech on this one.
Good answer. Good answer.
Very interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you guys have more questions?
Yeah, I have a question for both of you, but especially for Eden. I was thinking when you were answering to Alban, with, of course, a very Western point of view, but I was thinking about the example of Spain. During Middle Age, after Muslims invaded the south of Spain, and today we have the presence of those ages where Jewish, Muslims, Catholics were living together peacefully, and they were actually exchanging their culture, their skills, their religious. And of course, I'm aware that this is an ideal, a Western ideal of peace, of democracy, of living together with a huge melting pot. But don't you think that one day someone maybe would stand and say, okay, guys, let's stop and let's try to live together with a common state in a common land, and just take the advantages that we have together to build something new and concrete and solid?
Great question. Can I take this one, Tom? And then you can follow up if it's okay.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So happy you asked that, Timothy, because I have a really good answer that I want to give you on this one. So first of all, let's set the terms right. Okay, it's really important to talk about terms. Melting pot and multiculturalism. Tom knows this one by heart because I keep on fixing people, like, you know, kind of making sure that we talk on the same terms here, because it's really, there's a huge difference. What you know today as Europeans living in a multicultural society, okay, where you have a lot of minorities living together, right? You would have, Germany would have Turks, they would have Muslims community, they would have Indian community. You could see it in the States. Canada, for example, where my mom come from Canada, has multiculturalism as a policy. Okay, the understanding that different cultures can live together on the same land and share, like you said, a lot of you know, beautiful insights to learn and to grow. There are disadvantages in multiculturalism that a lot of times, maybe you guys even see it in France, that a lot of societies living together doesn't mean they're sharing the same base, doesn't mean they're sharing the same background. Okay, and multiculturalism and globalism is dropping down, guys. It's dying. I don't know if you're noticing, but look at Germany. Okay, we have a lot of young fifth generation people. Okay, they've been living in Germany for fifth generation of Turkish people that immigrated like centuries ago, and they don't identify themselves as German at all. They don't speak German. They don't go to German schools, and they don't, you know, sing the German anthem, and so on and so on and so on. So what makes them German? They're just Turks living on German territory. Is it important or not? I don't know. Second side of that spectrum of multiculturalism, we have a melting pot, and that's something different, because a melting pot is a lot of different cultures, right, coming together to one place to become a one society that is whole. Now, there's disadvantages in this as well, meaning people would have to put aside their, you know, past ethnicity background, and they would have to learn one language, they would have to study in one way, they would have to see themselves as one people. But it's a glue that is stronger. And when I said that globalism is dying and multiculturalism is in a drop, is because if we look at the way of history and what's going on in the past, let's take 70 years, okay? Nationalism was at its peak in Europe, okay, in the Second World War II, right, in the World War II. And then it dropped so bad that people were, I have a lot of German friends that were saying that for years they felt uncomfortable seeing the German flag because it reminds them of dark time. At that point of the drop, Israel was born with the highest nationalism wave that Tom just explained before. And as this drop of nationalism and globalism rising, and let's open the borders, let everyone in, let's have a global world where we can learn from each other, it also had a breaking point. And we see it now. You're the generation who is seeing the globalism breakdown, where you have a massive amount of immigrants, especially from Middle East, coming into Europe with a clear identity of who they are, who they want to be, where they're coming from, and when they're going. And for a lot of young Europeans, and I know, cause I could see myself in, you know, with their thoughts with me, and I've traveled through enough places of Europe to have this discussion. A lot of, like, if we're taking Germany as an example, a lot of young Germans don't have that clear identity of being German. And when suddenly a person who came from Syria is standing in front of them and saying, I know who I am, not all German knows. And that shakes people out. And saying, wait a minute, I need to have my own identity. And here we see nationalism, not in a bad way, but the quest of being a part of something. And there's a really, really, really fine line between multiculturalism, a lot of cultures living alongside one another and having the strong glue that makes them a people and not just different tribes, into a melting pot that allows everyone to have an expression of their own identity in one society. Israel is more leaning to a melting pot. Okay, we need to understand that from the Jewish perspective. It's a melting pot, but as a society that's trying to be democratic, we need to learn how to be more multicultural. if it makes sense what I'm saying here, okay? Meaning we should embrace more and more of the, let's call it like a Israeli, Arab, Palestinian culture around us, integrated into our own, seeing one another more, learning from one another. I think we've been doing that. I don't think the Palestinian side want to participate in something like that, I must say. You know, like it's not something that they're there yet. But for the Israeli Arabs, young people, for sure, they just want to be Israelis. They want to have equal rights. They want to have the opportunities like I do as a Jewish person. They are thriving if they choose to be a part of the Israeli society. They are thriving if they don't want to be a part of the Jewish society. That's something else. Israeli society, sorry, not Jewish society. I'm fixing myself, correcting myself. So I guess that's it. Sorry, I was like losing my there for a minute, but I think you got my answer fully on.
Was good. Very, very good answer. I always like listening to Eden. Yeah, no, I really do. I talk to her a lot. Ask her. I'll give a slightly different take on those things. So, okay, when Israel was formed, the majority of Israelis living here were secular European Jews. When other Jews started arriving here, these secular European Jews expected the other Jews who came here to behave like secular European Jews who are socialists. That's basically what they expected. That's what they had in mind. And they even went as far of having government policies that somewhat force the population to behave in that way. Now, it was not like a law that you must be socialist, for example. But if you lived in a kibbutz, which I don't know if you know, but a kibbutz, a socialist, almost borderline communist, communal agricultural village. Nowadays, a lot of them are privatized already, or they are socialist, but they're a lot more easygoing about it. They would receive huge subsidies from the government, whereas other towns did not. What was played in the radio, the songs that Israel would send to the Eurovision were with a very clear European tone, let's say. Israel evolved a lot since then, and you can really see a much more natural melting pot occurring in the Jewish population, with everybody bringing a little bit of their former heritage, so to speak, and creating something new. As Eden said, with the Arab Israelis, and I really want to differentiate this, the Arabs living in Israel are viewed by many Israelis as a group that should and will be totally equal partners in this project called the Israeli state, the state of Israel. Sorry. Now, of course, there are difficulties because you have Arabs living on this side of the border and they have family on the other side of the border and they feel in a lot of conflict. I met a lot of Israeli Arabs that told me, like, who are you to call me an Israeli Arab? I am Palestinian. I am a Palestinian Israeli. I am completely Palestinian. And some of them say, I am an Israeli Arab. I am Israeli and I'm also Arab. And you're really seeing this now in this generation of young Israelis, young Jewish Israelis, and young Arab Israelis, this will for integration. With the Palestinians, it's very different. Also for the Palestinians themselves and also for the Israelis. I think that the idea of a multicultural state is will require a lot of work in order for it to actually function. Let's put it this way. Because when you allow every single group to hold its old values, its old traditions, its habits, its culture, its language, you will have huge problems of integrating them. And I think you're seeing it across Europe right now. Not that there are no immigrants in Europe that want to immigrate and become truly European. truly French, truly German, English, whatever. But there are large groups that for a long time were not forced to integrate. And now when France plays against Algeria, they wave the Algerian flag. They don't feel French at all. Even though they are not from Algeria, the last time any family member in their family saw Algeria was 60 years ago, whatever, they feel Algerian. I think that especially in the Middle East, but also in Europe, take former Yugoslavian countries, the war in Kosovo, Serbia, Croatia. The idea of a multi-ethnic state can work under very specific conditions. And so I would really not want to see this happen here in Israel, especially because we're living in the Middle East. And it took me a while because I was raised as a secular Israeli. Israelis consider themselves part of the Western world. Israelis consider themselves part of Europe, even though we're not really. You know, but we sing in the Eurovision, and for us it's enough. And it took us a really long time in Israel to understand how the Middle East thinks, and they think very, very differently from European and from American perspectives. I'll elaborate more later if you want, even on an individual level. I'll give you ways to contact me, and you can ask me as many questions as you want. We just don't have a lot of time to get into it right now because it's a process to change the way you see the world to fit the way they see the world. But for example, the idea of a nation state is foreign to the Middle East. There are only 4 countries in the Middle East that really have, I don't like to use this word, but legitimacy of existing. It is Egypt, Iran, Turkey, and Israel. These are the only historic countries that existed by themselves under maybe different names. The Ottoman Empire, the Persian Empire, whatever. Egypt was Egypt the whole time. Sorry, Alban, I couldn't hear you.
It depends on how far you go in history.
Yeah.
Yes, but I'm saying, of course, but I'm saying from the Middle Eastern perspective, the way the Middle East is being viewed, okay? If you're talking to Arabs, and it came as a shock to me when I first heard it, but Saudis and Egyptians are on a different level than Palestinians, for example, and Lebanese. Why? It's a different mentality. And I know that I'm not trying to, by the way, this is not about race, don't get me wrong. I don't think that they are racially different or something like that, okay? But their mentality and their culture, in my opinion, right now, does not fit Israel, does not fit the Western world, and I would not want to see a joint country of Israelis and Palestinians together. I would be very happy to have a Palestinian state next to me as good neighbors, and we can trade and we can do research together in science, but I would not want them to I would not want to share a nation with them. I hope it makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah, completely. Thank you.
Right.
Hey guys, I think we're ready for a last question because it's been a fascinating conversation, but we are almost 2 hours online, and I'm sure that you guys have things to do this weekend.
Yes, absolutely. And so do I, and I'm hungry. I will very, very quickly respond to the questions that you wrote to me, because I forgot to do that and I don't want to disappoint anyone. All right, so very briefly, and I can elaborate later and more in individual level if you'd like. Why have you become less radical as regards to your Gaza experience? I answered that. And do you have any Arab Israeli friends? And if yes, do you talk politics with them?
I answered that.
Yes,
Yeah,
Eden
you
answered
guys
that.
answer.
Personally, I had friends when I was in school, in university, because we studied together. In Israel, and you can ask Pauline about that also, even in Haifa, which has a huge Arab population, Jews and Arabs don't really live together. Even in cities where they live together, they live in different neighborhoods. And so I think the first time I met Arabs, I was in the Scouts, and we had a trip, and we had some Arabs from Jaffa that came, and that's the first time I met Arabs. I was 15 or so. So we're not
So
very.
let me change your
Yeah.
mind about this one, because
Eden is
Tom
different.
knows about the building I live in Tel Aviv. And above me, I have an apartment with 3 roommates. One is a Muslim, one is a Druze, one is Jewish, and I talk politics to them all the time. We exchange recipes. We have a cigarette outside. It's just a neighbor kind of a concept. So yes, I do have Israeli Arab friends, and I talk politics a lot with them.
Yes.
I disagree,
Yeah.
I agree, but I talk to them about it, of course.
Yeah. We talked a lot of politics in university, especially with the ones that came very close. We became close friends because it is a sensitive topic, and you don't want to start a fight, especially when you're spending 6 years learning together. Do you think that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is perfectly handled by Israel? 100%.
No.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's not that we are evil, but we are, obviously we make mistakes. We are a nation. So when you bring a bunch of people together, not always the best idea is the one that advances forward. You can just look at I don't know, French soccer fans, for example, and their chants, or.
But can I add something about that? I think I would divide my answer on this one into 2. If the way we're handling the conflict is right or no, I said no. But the way we are caring for the Palestinians, I would say yes, because this is a very different part. We are understanding to solve a problem, we're not sure how to do it, and we also understand that there are people who are stuck in the middle of this crisis. And I don't know if you know, but if you want to read out a little bit about the amount of humanitarian aid that is being transferred to Gaza on a daily basis, I'm talking about between 30 to 40 trucks every day being sent by the IDF into the Gaza Strip. Look it out. There were some times that had different restrictions of what goes in there or not, but things are going in there, and the people are being treated. And this is something important that must be said. Yes, the conflict is far to being over, but the people of Gaza have not been left out, and this is something that needs to be known. Sorry, I was very enthusiastic about that part.
Good answer. How do you feel about Israel? I think you all understand that both me and Eden and almost every single Israeli loves Israel. We are very proud of our country, and we really, really enjoy being Israeli, especially because the hummus is amazing, like really amazing. All right. In your opinion, what are the? Oh, sorry. Was there a question?
Go ahead, Alvan.
No, I was just saying that a little bit up there, the hummus was nice too.
Yeah.
Because I was in Beirut the whole year, and
listen, it's my dream.
Have great food.
Yeah. The whole Levant
has
the best food ever.
It's my dream to go to visit Lebanon. If I could ever do it one day, I will 100% do it.
Maybe one day.
Tom told you that I am a half Syrian. My dad's family came from Aleppo. So all of the food that I grew up by my grandparents is Syrian, Lebanese. Like these are foods that I was raised on. So it doesn't really matter if I'm Jewish or not Jewish. Foods is connecting people, right? Like we eat with our hearts. So definitely would want to have a visit.
Yeah, which is why I usually go and eat at Eden's place because it's good food. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so cool.
In your opinion, what are the perspective of evolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? We answered that. As an Israeli, do you consider Palestine as a country or nation? Wow, that's a really tough one for the end. They are a nation. I think that every people that decide that they are a people are, they deserve a state of their own and they deserve to choose their own fate. They're not a country because they're not a country yet. I assume they will be eventually. Yeah, I just hope we'll get there sooner than later, and that no one will die in the process. I think that's the main part.
I'm gonna give my quick answer about this one. They're not a country because they're not a country. Okay, we know that. Like by what defines a country, they're not a country and they're not a state. If they're a nation, it depends about their nation identity, and they're not there yet in what I think, because I think their identity as a Palestinians today is based on a hate towards Israel. Because if you would take Israel out of the picture, what is the Palestinian identity? Seriously, ask yourself, what is the Palestinian identity? What is combined for the people in Gaza and in the West Bank? Sorry, kind of flipped my mind. What is their common values except being here and hating Israel and wanting, you know, we're here first? What is that identity story? What is the narrative that holds their nations strong enough to be leading country? The French people have a strong narrative identity for centuries. Okay, no matter who came and who they fought, they had a strong identity as French. And I'm not sure yet that the Palestinian has that identity without the opposite or the opposition towards Israel into it. And the minute the generation are going to form something that is unique for them, and not a struggle is not enough. I know that the Jewish people is kind of, you know, familiar with that concept of we struggled, so we together, and this is what is our story. But I think that the Palestinian needs to have another layer. I don't know what it is of a nation's identity to become a nation that is ready and prepared to lead generations after it.
Yeah.
Can I add
yes,
something about it? I think that the Palestinian identity, for some of them, I don't know if it's the majority, but rests on the fact that they lived on the land, no matter it was under the Turkish occupation or the British one. They lived on this specific land, and a lot of families were expelled from it. So actually, I think that the Palestinian identity rests on the hate about Israel and the wound of exploitation and so of the Nakba, actually. I think that the founding moment of it is 1948.
Agreed completely, Pauline. But I would ask myself if I would compare the Jewish, you know, the Israeli Jewish identity to the Palestinians. I would compare it like our whole identity is hating the Germans, right? And wanting to live here. So, but it's not. It's not. We have an identity saying, as a people, we want the way to express ourselves and have a legitimate way of living as the Jewish people in our country of our own. The Judaism religion as its own is so complex and hard that you have to have a government that is fully equipped to deal with that. This is one. Second, you can't build an identity of hatred. You can't. You need to have other elements to it. Now, I'm sure that I'm being, you know, I'm doing harm with a lot of people's narrative from the Palestinian side, and I'm sure someone would disagree with me completely. But if you zoom out and you ask yourself what makes those people a people, because they weren't one tribe when the Brits came here or when the Turks came here, they were spread, you know, they were like spread out, you know, through the land, and it was small villages that had self-economic family corps and farming, and that was it. That was it. Like, ask them. That was it. It was a big family united thing between each tribe, but it wasn't a people. They didn't have a heritage, didn't have a culture, they didn't have customs, they didn't have norms. These are things that are very, very, very important in a nation story. And I definitely agree with what you said, Pauline. Like it's about a lot of hate into it, and I think there need to be a fourth generation, right, that is leading a way to a vision of a new world for those really, really. My heart goes out to Palestinians. Don't get me wrong. I don't hate any Palestinians. I hate bad leaders. I don't hate people in that matter. But I really think they deserve a better future that is not based on hate and not based on land, based on idea of wanting to have a structured life in a way, an economy and education and so on.
Yeah, I really agree with Eden on this one. And I'll add, it's a very interesting tool to measure Middle Eastern societies. So let's say you're in France, you're living in Paris, and you meet someone from Lyon. You know, good-looking girl, guy, whatever, and you decide to get married. Yeah, Victor, for example. All right. And will your families oppose it because he's from Lyon and not from Paris? Probably not. Maybe. I don't know I know there's a difference between southern France and Paris, okay, but probably will not. And in Israel, the same. If you meet, I'm from Tel Aviv, and I meet a girl from a kibbutz somewhere in the south, or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Palestinian society is very different. Vast majority of Palestinian society marries inside the city and inside the clan as well. Okay, I did not know this until not so long ago. This is a very effective tool at measuring the social structure of the society. If you look at the Gulf states, okay, the reason why they are very successful is not because they have oil. Some of them have oil, but some of them don't. If I'm not wrong, Abu Dhabi doesn't have oil. They're all business. The reason why they are very cohesive in their structure is that they are one ethnic group there. They are one tribe. And so there's not really a problem in electing a leader. The leader of the state is the leader of the tribes. You get married within the family, within the clan, within the tribe. It's not really a big issue. Not immediate family, not brother and sister, but cousin, second cousin, third cousin, things like that. They do that. Palestinian society, if a Palestinian from Gaza meets a Bedouin girl, or a Palestinian from Ramallah meets a girl from Jenin, they will have strong opposition from their families regarding this union.
Also between Muslims and Christians in the Arab society.
That's for sure.
It's completely different.
Yeah, and I learned this because I asked. I have a very good friend from school, and I asked her. She's Muslim, but she's very secular. And I asked her, like, why doesn't she meet someone at university or something? And she says, listen, I have to meet someone who's Muslim, secular, because that's what I want, and he has to be from the north. I can't find a guy in Jerusalem. And I was shocked. I said, what? Why not? And she says, because he's not from the north. And she's an Israeli Arab. She has an Israeli identity card. She lives in Israel. And she told me it's the same with Palestinians. If a Palestinian from Jericho and a Palestinian from Ramallah meet, 9.9999 out of 10, they will not get married. And it shows you how fractured that society is. Now, I'm not saying that Israel doesn't have problems, but regarding political views, culture, religion, religious background, and things like that. But it's not like that. That is very radical. I was really shocked about it. And I think once Palestinians move on to this next stage of, okay, enough with blaming Israel, let's take control of our own lives. Let's see how we develop what we have right now, which is what the Jews did. I mean, they were under British occupation technically, but they had an education system, they had universities, they had a healthcare system, they had not really a government, but a democratically elected body that represented them. And I think once Palestinians move on from I hate Israel to how do I make my life better, then you will see the change. Guys, last questions? No.
Okay.
Perfect.
Hopefully, the first time I heard
we
no
could
one
talk
ask
about that for whole days, but
yes, we can. We can
Yes,
definitely.
yeah,
That's what I
for
said. I
sure,
never
for
had
sure.
something. Heard that. Go ahead,
I would just
Alvin.
have one last question. It's
Yes.
about what Israel is doing in Lebanon, because they take a lot of freedom in sending drones and stuff because of military conflict. And I do understand, because there is a Hezbollah and they're in direct conflict with Hezbollah. But there is a history behind that. And for example, Sharon, I think it was a military general, like chief, army chief. what do you guys think, for example, of the such a like a character or with Sharon, with as I was in Lebanon, I had the Lebanese point of view, definitely. And for example, I was told that he took the decision to invade Lebanon, um, like to Beirut, rather than only 20 or 40 kilometers because of the rocket security and stuff. And
Yes.
he did that without the prime minister view. So this is, I mean,
Yes.
internal conflict in Israel, but this impacts the Arab world and their relationship with that. And nowadays we can see that Lebanon, Hezbollah is strong because the Lebanese that feel at war with Israel, they feel that the Lebanese army is not able to defend them, and that only Hezbollah can defend them from the enemy, which is Israel from their point of view. But so Hezbollah is gaining power because of this Israeli freedom, I think, that they take with like planes and stuff. I won't say this, like there used to be hate before also, definitely, but Hezbollah is gaining ground because of their reactivity and their like ability to fight Israel. So what do you think about, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
the way Israel behaves with
Mhm.
Lebanon, which is the only stable country in the region, actually?
So I'll give a very quick overview because we really don't have
Yeah,
time to go
be quick.
into detail.
Don't worry. I mean,
Okay.
I guess you
Lebanon.
guys have to talk time.
Yeah. I'm getting really hungry. No, I'm kidding. Lebanon is and was a very fractured country. Now, when they were more secular in the 60s, 70s, and also 80s, it was better. However, you have to understand, you have in Lebanon, you have Christians, you have Druze, you have Shiite, you have Sunni, you have a lot of different religions. You have a lot of different clans and tribes that each have their own religion. And some Christian tribe might not cooperate with another Christian tribe. Regarding Sharon, it's a huge topic. So we don't have time to go into it right now. You should read about it yourselves, of course, and I will provide material and ask me questions, no problem. What's happening right now in Lebanon? I think this is the most important thing, because Israel doesn't base its decisions on what was in the 80s. We are mostly looking at what is coming now and what will happen. Lebanon, because it's such a fractured country, and just so you understand, in the constitution, the prime minister has to be Shia, the head of the president must be Christian, and the head of parliament must be Sunni, or the other way around, or something like that. It's a total mess. And that's why they're unable to form any type of functioning government, because it's a total mess. That's why many countries try to seize that opportunity. So Syria was heavily involved in Lebanon. There's no more Syria, so they're not involved anymore. And Iran is heavily involved in Lebanon. Iran found a Shia partner in Hezbollah. And so they gave them insane funding. And I'm talking about billions of dollars, of euros, okay? That's why Hezbollah is gaining strength, because it is so well funded in a country that is going bankrupt.
It's not only that it's so strong financially, but it's also strong politically, because today Hezbollah has such a strong power in Lebanon that even if the Lebanon government is feeling uncomfortable and understanding that Hezbollah would lead to a war with Israel, they can't do much, because Hezbollah is threatening all the time if they don't agree with, if the government doesn't agree with the Hezbollah, operations, they would break the government and they will form a civic war. So basically, Hezbollah is actually holding the Lebanese government today as hostage and kind of manipulating them according to the Iranic structure. Hezbollah today has more of a stronger army than the Lebanese army is as a state. You have to understand that. They're literally, I've been to a few, digged tunnels 12 meters down underneath the grounds in order to cross the border with Israel and to infiltrate Israeli communities for terror attacks, obviously, not to provide food and shelter. Okay, it's not for fun games. So the situation today between Israel and Lebanon, Hezbollah, is so delicate, and Iran is involved, and Syria is involved. I will also provide names of a few research organizations if you want to read about that, map out what's going on in the northern part of Israel with Syria and Lebanon. They have great materials. They'll be happy to provide it, but it's very, very complex, and actually it's in like a structure of glass. You know, if you go like this, everything can fall apart in a minute there. And today Israel policy feels as it's the minute Iran would give the strike to Hezbollah, anything could happen here. Anything could happen here.
Yeah, and the reason why Israel is sending drones, as you said before, or airstrikes and things like that in Lebanon, is mostly because we are trying very, very hard to make sure that Iran, through Iraq and Syria, doesn't provide Hezbollah with weapons that they could attack us with, that we can't handle. Yeah,
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, they do a lot, almost on a weekly basis. We've stopped most of it, can't stop all of it. And I can guarantee you that from an Israeli perspective, we have no interests in Lebanon because we already have enough problems on our hands. The main concern of the Israeli public government, and this is important for you to understand, regardless of what government will rise here, it could be the most left-wing government that Israel ever had. Iran is basing itself hard in Syria and Lebanon. And we cannot allow that to happen because they can strike in Haifa, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and we cannot fire a rocket all the way to Iran. I mean, we can, but they are so far away that it will have almost no effect. And so what we are trying to do is we're trying to make sure Iran doesn't completely surround us with Hezbollah in the north, Iranian-backed militias in Syria, Hamas in the south. That's what we're trying to achieve.
They're doing the night walkers on us, right? They're all coming to the borders, like.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Hey, Luis, you wanted to ask something? Because I see your mic is on. I thought you wanted to ask something. Luis?
No, it's right. I was listening.
Oh, okay. I thought you turned on your mic because you wanted to ask anything.
No, it's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Guys, thank you very, very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to you.
I will send. Yeah. I will send my contact information and Eden's as well, if you like. Also, me, Eden, and another good friend of ours have a podcast that you can listen to. A little new project that we're figuring out, going pretty well. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry it lasted so long, but it's a lot to cover. If you found it interesting, perfect. I'm really happy. If not, well, your fault. You shouldn't have joined. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Really, guys, thank you so much. You're awesome. And really
enjoy your weekend, guys. It was really great seeing all of you. Thank you for having interest in us. That's actually really, really, nice to know that people want to learn about other cultures. I see more faces now that we're saying goodbye. So hi to everyone. Enjoy your weekend. It was really great. Maybe we can do it again one time, anytime you want. Tom is great for organizing. Girls, thank you for helping this happening. It was really a pleasure answering all of your questions and sharing my perspective on things. So thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
take care, guys.
Bye-bye.